Someone in your group isn't moving. They were fine yesterday. They ate with everyone. They laughed. They slept next to you, and now they're just still. No heartbeat. No breath. Eyes open, but seeing nothing. You've never seen this before. Nobody in your group has ever explained what this means. There are no words for it yet. No rituals, no instructions, no one to tell you what to do next. What do you do? Do you leave them there and move on? Do you cover them? Do you stay with them? And here's the thing that nobody ever asks. What did it feel like? Did they grieve? Did they understand what had happened? Did they know that one day the same thing would happen to them? Because answering that question doesn't just tell us about death. It tells us when we became human. For a long time, scientists assumed early humans treated death the way animals do. You leave the body, you move on. Survival comes first, sentimentality comes later. And for a while, the evidence seemed to agree. But then, in 1960, archaeologists excavating a cave called Shanidar in the mountains of northern Iraq found something that changed the conversation completely. 9 Neanderthal skeletons, buried together intentionally. And around one of them, a skeleton now called Shanidar 4, they found something in the soil that stopped everyone cold. Pollen. Enormous amounts of pollen. From at least 8 different flowering plants. Yarrow, groundsel, grape hyacinth, ephedra. These weren't random. These plants didn't just blow into a cave by accident. Someone had placed flowers on that grave roughly 60,000 years ago. Now, some researchers later argued the pollen could have been brought in by burrowing rodents. Science is never simple. But here's what nobody disputes. The body was placed. Deliberately positioned, oriented in a specific direction. That alone is intentional burial. And Shanidar isn't alone. At a site called Qafzeh in Israel, archaeologists found a child buried 92,000 years ago, one of the oldest intentional burials ever discovered, with deer antlers placed across the body. At Sungir in Russia, 2 children were buried 34,000 years ago, head to head, covered in over 10,000 mammoth ivory beads that would have taken someone thousands of hours to carve. Thousands of hours. For children who were already gone, that's not survival behavior, that's grief behavior. So what did the process actually look like? Here's what the archaeological evidence pieced together across dozens of sites tells us. First, the body was prepared. At multiple Neanderthal sites, researchers found bones that show signs of careful defleshing, cuts in specific deliberate patterns, not the chaotic marks of predators. These were made by stone tools, carefully, after death. In some cases, this was likely practical. Bones were used as tools or for marrow. But in others, the placement of those same bones suggests something more intentional. The remains were kept, curated, sometimes stored and revisited long after death. At a site in Spain called Atapuerca, in a chamber deep inside a cave system called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, archaeologists found the skeletal remains of at least 28 individuals dating to roughly 430,000 years ago. Pre-modern humans. Pre-Neanderthal. They were not killed there. There are no signs of predation. There are no signs of a living camp. The cave was used for one purpose only, placing the dead somewhere specific, deep underground, out of reach. 430,000 years ago. That's nearly 500,000 years of humans choosing to do something with their dead, not just leaving them where they fell. Second, people stayed with the body. Modern hunter-gatherer groups studied by anthropologists, groups whose way of life is likely closest to our ancient ancestors, almost universally hold some kind of death vigil. They stay with the body, sometimes for days. They speak to it. They hold it. We can't know for certain ancient humans did the same, but we know they kept fires burning near burial sites. We know they marked graves with objects. The behavior of staying, of not immediately moving on, is written into the archaeological record. Third, the grave was given things, not just flowers and antlers. At Sungir, those 10,000 ivory beads weren't just decoration. They were sewn onto clothing. Someone dressed those children for burial in garments that took months to make. Ochre, red pigment, was placed over bodies at dozens of sites. Some researchers believe it symbolized blood, life, the idea that something continues even after the body stops. The dead were being sent somewhere. Here's the question that actually keeps researchers awake at night. Did ancient humans understand that death was permanent? that it would happen to them? Because understanding your own mortality, what psychologists call mortality salience, is one of the most cognitively demanding things a brain can do. It requires you to project yourself into an imagined future where you no longer exist. Most animals almost certainly cannot do this, but ancient humans almost certainly could. And the evidence is in the burial goods. When you place a weapon in a grave, a spear, a knife, you're imagining the dead person using it somewhere else. When you put food in a grave, you're imagining them being hungry. When you dress them in their finest clothing, you're sending them somewhere as if they might be seen. The afterlife wasn't invented by organized religion. It was invented by humans sitting next to a body, unable to accept that the person they loved was simply gone. And that moment, that refusal, might be the most human moment in all of history. At La Ferracie in France, a Neanderthal child was buried in a small pit with a stone slab placed over the grave. On the underside of that slab, someone had carved small circular cup marks, deliberately. The slab was positioned so those marks faced down, facing the child. Nobody else would ever see them. Someone carved a message for the dead. Here's what nobody expected. Death didn't just create grief. It created culture. Think about what happens when a group loses someone. They gather, they talk. The old people tell stories about who the person was, what they did, what they meant. Those stories have to go somewhere, into the memories of the young who will one day tell them again. Burial sites became the first permanent locations in human life. Groups that moved seasonally, who left no lasting mark on the landscape, left graves. And those graves became anchors, places you come back to, places that tie you to the land. Archaeologists believe some early burial sites were revisited for generations, not just out of practicality, but out of connection. The dead kept people in place. They created the first sense of home and the art. The cave paintings at Altamira, at Qafzeh, at Lascaux. Many researchers now believe they weren't random decoration. They were ritual. The deepest parts of caves, unreachable by light, painted in chambers no one used for shelter. Those images may have been connected to ceremony for the dead, to communication with something beyond the living world. The first art and the first burials appear in the archaeological record at nearly the same time. That is almost certainly not a coincidence. So what did ancient humans do when someone died? They stayed. They prepared the body with care. They placed the dead somewhere deliberate, in the earth, in a cave, marked with flowers or ochre or ivory beads. They gave them things for the journey. They told stories about them that would survive for generations. And in doing all of that, they discovered something that no other species ever had, that a life, one specific, irreplaceable life, mattered enough to mark, to mourn, to remember. The first grave was dug nearly 500,000 years ago. We still haven't stopped digging them. And maybe that's not just evidence of death. Maybe it's the clearest evidence we have that long before language, long before civilization, long before anything we'd recognize as society, there was love.